This is my hometown, Mapua. Used to be once upon a time a place for crab fishing, but that industry dried up quite a while ago now. Fishing's changed here. Still good. Most of my fishing is that point over there, just beyond. I go 2 or 3k out in my kayak and fish. I like kayak fishing because I enjoy the exercise and I enjoy catching fish. This morning, well, I'm taking Johnny for a walk. That's Johnny there. You know your name, don't you, boy, eh? He's actually already had a walk on the farm, but I'm also taking him for a walk along the beach. And I wanted to share a story with you guys. I have struggled a lot. I've had sleepless nights and I've worried. Worry is such a needless thing, isn't it? But some things emotionally we just can't help worry. Well, I can't anyway. Maybe you can. Maybe you're made out of stone, but I've got a soul and a conscious mind, and a conscious mind. My subconscious and my conscious mind both struggle with things that are related to family, particularly my blood. One is my mother and one is my father. And I struggle seeing them grow old and weak, going towards the inevitable death that they will have. And I know this is a natural thing, but it's so cruel sometimes. My father has FND, which is a neurological disorder. He's got all his marbles. He was once a very fit, strong man, very, very able man, able-bodied in every way, and to see him deteriorate with a neurological condition where he can no longer even go to the toilet without someone helping him, and see him lose his independence bit by bit, physically piece by piece. First of all, watch him the day he could no longer drive, and seeing him lose all these things, and it broke my heart. It breaks my heart. And then there's my mother, and I've got a really good story to tell you about my mum. And this is a story about how I have internally changed the hurt into something that's not fear-based, but based with love. And I think there's a lesson to learn from my lesson for everybody that gets to my age in their 60s or 70s, who's lucky enough to have their parents still alive, but is watching them deteriorate. So my mum, a few years back, we noticed she started forgetting things, the early signs of dementia, and so we suggested, look Mum, maybe it's time to come and live with us up here in Nelson, my brother and myself. And she was like, no, and we wanted her to move from her little cottage. And who could blame her for not wanting to leave her little cottage? But as she deteriorated, it got worse and worse, and eventually it got to a point where she started doing things that just weren't good. She'd be up at 3 o'clock in the morning outside in the neighbour's garden and stuff, and it's like, no, it's time now. But the authorities wouldn't help us, and we went to every government department, every service that you could think of to try to get help. And we spent lots of time going down there trying to get her from her home, but we couldn't. And it was difficult. Had we got her out sooner, she wouldn't have deteriorated as quickly as she did. And then there was the death of my nephew Mikhail, who drowned. And he was like a son to her. She'd raised him because my sister was sick, so she'd raised Mikhail, and she had a room for him. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Poor mum went into grief, and then she really deteriorated. And still we couldn't get her out of her home, and she was not doing well in there. She was not eating properly, she wasn't keeping herself clean, and I was constantly having to ring up services to go and check. We had someone supposedly checking on her twice a week, but they weren't doing their job. They just pull up in their car outside and talk to her, but they never even went inside and looked in her kitchen. Had they walked inside and looked in her kitchen, they would have seen that she had no food, and she would have, the person that was checking her would have seen that she actually was not clean. and these basic needs. And so eventually my brother and I managed to get her in to see a psychiatrist, and they wanted to put her straight away into a unit, and she was still living in a home, and we weren't going to have that because that would have been a shock, and she would have been just basically locked up. And we managed to trick her into coming up to Nelson and left her home, and we later sold her home. I went back down there. My girlfriend Julie helped me. She did the major heavy lifting, literally. I was kind of in a state of shock, breaking down my mother's home and pulling all the things that she loved, into boxes, and throwing things out that were so meaningful for her that were not going to mean anything to anybody else, but she could no longer maintain and look after. And this is heartbreaking in itself. And I eventually sold the home, and we got her into a really beautiful, wonderful place here in Wakefield, the Wakefield homestead. A wonderful place, I convalesced myself when I was doing my battle, healing after my battle with cancer. I spent 3 weeks, 18 days in that place, and just under 3 weeks, and this was really, really a great place for Mum. She settled in pretty quick, and she enjoyed the music. They had music every week. She loves music. She started writing her poetry, and she started to really put on weight, and she looked good again, and she became happier than she'd ever been. And she missed her little cottage, but she actually settled in. And my brother works in the kitchen there. He's a kitchen hand, so she saw Tristan every weekend, and I would go out during the week and see her. So she had more contact with Tristan and me than she'd normally had, and also she had some friends that dropped in occasionally from Christchurch. So this worked out really good. But then, dementia is such a cruel disease, her dementia got worse, and this place was not a dementia unit, it was just for rest level care. And Mum started to do the things that people with dementia do, and she could no longer stay there. So again, we had to shift her. So we shifted her to Flaxmore, which is another rest home, but this time it's got a lock-up unit. And Mum couldn't understand why she was in this place with all these people. She said, "Son, I don't know why I'm here. These people around me, they're not well." And the trouble with my mother's dementia, she's got frontal lobe dementia, is that she could read perfectly, she could write poetry, she could do all the normal things, but she could not stop herself from wandering at night. So therefore I couldn't have her at the old farmhouse, because you're not allowed to lock somebody up in your own home. You can in a lock-up dementia unit, but not in your own home. It's considered elder abuse. Otherwise I'd have her at the old farmhouse. And so it took a wee while for her to settle in there, but eventually she started to settle in. One of the other people in there pushed her over, and she ended up going to hospital with a sore shoulder, and this was not good. But who knows what happened there. Maybe the lady come into my mother's room, and Mum had pushed her, and Mum had fallen over. We don't really know what happened. And accidents happen. So anyway, every time I've been going there for the last she's been now there for 6 to 8 weeks about, and every time I've gone there, she's always said to me when she's seen me, she's gone, "Son, you've got to get me out of here." And I have watched her closely when she knows I'm not watching her. A couple of visits ago, I watched her sitting with her feet up, eating her dessert, watching Coronation Street in the evening, laughing her head off and having a great time. And I went up to her, and as soon as she saw me, she was all sad again. And I did this a few times, and I realised that when she saw me, she was always using the old emotions of her relationship with me as her mother, and to get something which I couldn't provide. So this time, this is the story really I wanted to tell you. This time I changed the narrative. Come on, Johnny, let's find a nice rock to park up and finish the story on. See, that one just looks like a perfect seat, doesn't it? It's even shaped with a flat bit on it. Right there, lovely. Yeah, not for you though, for me, mate. Alright, I guess we can both share it, since you like it as much as me. I went inside, and there was Mum sitting with all the other people, some of them in really bad shape, some of them dribbling. One guy was playing with himself. You know, all the stuff you see, it's just the way it is in those places. And she was laughing. She was watching television. She was watching, I don't know what program it was, but she was laughing again. And I thought, she looks happy. She's got her feet up. So I went up to her and I said, "G'day, Mum." And she looked at me, and before she'd said like anything else, she was like, "Son, you've got to get me out of here. You've got to get me out of here." The same thing that she says every time. And I said, "Really? Weren't you just watching TV and having a good laugh? You got your feet up?" She goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, that seems like a pretty cool thing to be doing, Mum. Some people don't have TV. I don't have TV. And anyway, it's nearly dinner time. Have you cooked dinner yet?" She goes, well, no." And I said, "Well, why haven't you cooked dinner?" She goes, "I don't have to cook dinner." And I said, "Really? You always used to have to cook dinner when I lived at home with you." She goes, "I know." I said, "I've got to grow my potatoes in my garden. It takes a lot of work to grow my potatoes. Then I've got to wait to harvest them, and then I've got to harvest them, and then I've got to store them so they don't go rotten, and then I've got to take them out and clean them and eat them, and to eat them I've got to cook them. And then after I've cooked them I've got to wash all the dishes." Mum goes, "I know, I used to too." And I said, "So, well, how do you eat? What are you doing?" She goes, "Well, this man comes out." And I said, "A man that comes out?" She goes, "Yeah, and he gives me a meal." And I said, "Well, I've just gone past the kitchen here, and they're cooking up lamb chops, and they're cooking up fresh vegetables with spring potatoes and peas and gravy. Is that the same food you're getting?" She goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, why aren't you in the kitchen peeling the potatoes and helping with the meal?" She says, "I don't have to here." I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, well, you know the rules. Whoever cooks, the other one has to do the dishes. I guess you'll be doing the dishes afterwards." She goes, "Well, no, I don't have to do any dishes." I said, "You don't do the dishes, Mum?" She goes, "No, I don't have to. They don't want me to." I said, "So you're telling me you get a free meal, then they take it away and you don't have to do the dishes?" She goes, "Exactly." I said, "Well, how much is this costing you, Mum? This must be costing a fortune." She goes, "Well, I don't pay anything. Nothing at all. I don't give them any money, and this happens every day." And I said, "So do you go to bed after you have that meal?" And she goes, "No." I said, "What happens then?" She goes, "Well, they bring me out dessert." I said, "Dessert?" She goes, "Yeah." She says, "I get ice cream and peaches sometimes, and sometimes I get a nice drink." I said, "Well, you must be doing the dishes to that." She goes, "No, I don't. They take it away." I said, "Then what happens?" She said, "Well, then I watch my favourite program, Coronation Street, and then I go to bed after Coronation Street." I said, "So let me get this right. You're in this place here, Mum, where you can watch TV, you get food, you don't have to do the dishes, you have no responsibility, and then you can go to bed, and you don't even have to do anything but just the things you want, eat and watch your favourite program. Are you allowed to feed the birds here? Because I know you love feeding the birds." She goes, "Well, yeah, I feed the birds every day. I save a little bit of food from what they give me. They don't know, and I tuck it here, and I go out in the garden and I feed it." I said, "You told me that feeding birds was the biggest joy you have in your life." She goes, "It is." And I said, "So you want me to take you away from a place where you get free food, you don't do dishes, you don't have to do any work, you get the dessert, you watch your favourite programs, you get to feed the birds, and you want to take, where am I going to take you to a place that can do better than that?" She goes, "Oh." I put my arm around her and I gave her a big kiss and a big hug, and I had the best visit with her. And I've been doing that every time I see her, and the visits have got better and better. So what she was doing was, she was kind of like going into the sort of negative, painful thing, and I was going into it with her, and I realised I've got to go into a positive place with my mum, because the reality is that it's as good as it can possibly be for my mother. I would like to have her at home, but like I said, technically we're not allowed to lock our parents in, and she would wander in the night, she'd end up out in the street getting hit by a car or walking into our dam drowning, so I can't do that. And so this is probably the best resolution. I am hoping to get her closer to me, so I don't have to travel so far to see her. But that's been the outcome of my mother, and since that visit, I'm sleeping a lot better. And I guess to round this story up, the whole moral really is, we can sometimes worry and upset ourselves and perpetuate a problem that only exists in our head, and we can change that problem and find the positive in it, which I've done with my mum. I've still got to work out how to do it with my dad, but I guess I'll say this: where there's life, there's always hope. I love visiting my father, and I found in the last few months I've been enjoying the visits with him even more. Dad seems to be listening more and more interested in my own life, and also my brother's. My brother said the same thing. He's really enjoying seeing Dad of late. Yes, it's growing old, and if we could live with our parents and look after them in their age, it would be good. But we have to leave home and get on with our own lives generally. I think if you are living at home with your parents, then it's really, really important, particularly if they're old. It's really important that you do 90% of the work, that you bring money into the home, and that you put food onto the shelves, and you do all the heavy lifting, and you keep the environment nice and serene and peaceful for them in their last years, and make it an environment that they can feel loved and supported. And that would be the ultimate. And we live in a society that's quite fragmented, and not all societies are like that. A lot of societies all live together, and maybe these problems don't arise, but it's just the way we've become, and I don't know it's good. I'm lucky, my daughter's with me right now. She comes back home quite regularly to see me, and hope she always will. And it's the best we can hope for as parents, is that our own children keep a healthy contact with us and a healthy respect. Anyway, as usual, these are only my views and not necessarily correct, only what I've found works for me, and it has worked for me. Right, we're going to take Johnny and carry on the walk down the beach. Make it a great day, go steady, be good, can't be good, be careful. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.